Here we are again.
Yeah, well, hopefully we have a new movie for you that you might not have seen, and it's another true story. So hopefully this is going to be exciting for everybody. We're really looking forward to sharing it with you. You found it, Nana, didn't
Mhm.
you? How long ago? Couple of weeks
Yeah,
ago.
yeah, I think.
Yeah. And then she said, "Oh, I think we should watch this movie. It's a really good one." Um, and the story is pretty intense. What the character goes through. It's there's some scenes in World War II, and yeah, he goes through a lot. He gets tortured by the Japanese. He gets caught. His plane gets blown up in the water, and
Pacific Ocean.
he's in the water for 47 days. He manages to survive that, and then he gets captured by the Germans. I'm not Germans, the Japanese, and then he's tortured, and he survives the whole thing, and he comes back, but he drinks to cope with that situation, and he pretends that nothing happened. He doesn't want to share about the experience. The film's called Unbroken: Path to Redemption. And so there's two movies. We're going to watch the second one, but the first movie is about um, really him being unbroken and seeing, oh wow, he survived all those things and he never broke. Yeah, basically. But then this movie is more about forgiveness and what he has to go through. So really, he has a major identity issue happening, and he enjoys this fantasy of hatred, of terror. Um, and so, really, what he's really doing is he's really, really facing his own mind as we are. We're really facing our own fantasies. And I think this is what this movie really shows. If we look at it, that we tell ourselves stories about ourselves, and we believe these stories to be true, and these stories are not true. And we create a self identity out of something that is completely and utterly an illusion. And maybe you've been telling this story all the time about the self concept that you are since time began, really. And then you still continue to tell the story, even though it's completely over. And so Jesus is really bringing us inside and saying, you've really got to look at this fantasy of yourself because it has nothing to do with who you are. And so this is how trauma comes about, doesn't it? An experience seemingly happens, and then you continue to carry that story with you, and you literally traumatize yourself over and over and over again. And some never escape that. That's the human condition. They actually don't release themselves for it. You don't see that it's actually not you. Um, the ego sort of latches onto it and says, "This is you." And then you repeat this story. You might go to therapy, try all sorts of different things. But yeah, in the background, there's that feeling that something really happened to the character of who you are, and then that has made you who you are. So it's a huge sort of identity with an illusion of yourself. And so that's very challenging when seemingly we order illusions and we think, well, being tortured is one of the most challenging illusions you can possibly deal with, but it's still not true. And then the same, well, in actual fact, believing that you're good as a person is a really challenging illusion. Yeah, it's no different than the tortured illusion. Um, and you go around and say, "Well, I'm now a good person," and you say, "I do all of these good things," and And you wear that on your chest now, and you tell everybody how good you are. And Jesus says, yeah, that's actually still an illusion too. It doesn't matter whether you have you're the tortured soul or you're the good soul in this world, it's still part of the illusion that has to be undone. And including the belief that something can be done to you outside. That's mainly what most traumas are, is there was something outside of me that came in and did something to this body identity, and now I'm traumatized by it because I can't let it go. That's really what we call trauma, including, suicide, for example. There's something in the background that's happened to you or that you've done that you're ashamed of or whatever, and you can't cope with it, and therefore you choose to kill yourself because of a fantasy of an illusion of yourself. So yeah, this is a really sort of this is great because he goes through a tremendous amount. That's why we're telling you now. He goes through a tremendous amount, and then he comes back, and to be able to cope with it, he starts to drink. And first of all, that's not so bad. But then he starts hallucinating and seeing the characters that tortured him. And in particular, one Japanese guard was very what's the word?
Evil.
Evil. Yeah. 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 So he really saw him as evil. Everybody was really, really frightened to him, frightened of this one, and they called him the bird. And it's like when he looked at you with complete evil eyes, and yeah, he beat them all and tortured them. And so, of course, really, the evil is only in your own mind. It's not outside. It's not outside of you. Nothing is it. No one's ever doing anything to you. This is actually a good response to this, and Jesus says this in so many ways, which is incredible, which is obviously the deepest teaching, really, is that you're doing it to yourself, that no one can do that to you because actually there is no other, and you're making it up. And I found another quote in how he says this. Every response you make to everything you perceive is up to you because your mind determines your perception of it. So this is his dream of evil, for example, in his own mind. And he obviously doesn't realize that the evil thoughts are coming from him, projected outward. And now there's seemingly evil coming back. And the only way to take it back is to see that evil does not actually exist. That's true forgiveness. So I thought actually our prayer, that what I just read from, is from chapter 10, which is the idols of sickness. And this is from the introduction. And I thought this could be really interesting for us as we watch it. So I recommend just really, really seeing, okay, what do I really believe here? Yeah, allow all the emotions just to be exactly as they are. You don't have to try and be spiritual over it or anything like that. Just allow everything to come exactly as it is. And when you're touched by something, that's great because you believe in that. Yeah. And what we're learning is, okay, I believe in it, but it doesn't mean to say it's the truth. So, okay, I believe in it, I'm experiencing something, and I can allow myself to feel that and to see it, and actually go to the point with Jesus where he shows you actually it's not true. So, I just found this just before we started. I thought it's really simple. It's a really simple, really. This is like the dreamer, the dream experience, really. And he's given us a question. Can anything exceed the love of God? That's our question to ourselves. Can anything exceed the love of God? That's what he's asking us. So that's the highest in it. Can anything exceed the love of God? And anything else is completely and utterly made up. That is absolutely fantastical. So yeah, this feels incredible. And what we loved about this movie and why Nana chose it, because it goes to true forgiveness, to see actually that nothing ever happened, and that you can forgive the seeming dream figures and say thank you. In actual fact, it actually helped him. So we cannot really, that's why we cannot judge the dream. So you can look at that. We can look at that through the movie. That would be fun as well. When you say, oh, something good is now happening to him. And then you say, oh, no, something bad is happening to him. Yeah. And Jesus says, don't judge. We cannot judge. We cannot judge the form. We cannot judge what is good, what is bad. We do not know what anything is for. And as we know for ourselves, I thought that was good. I thought this was good for me. And it turned out it was bad for me. And then we say, I thought this was going to be bad for me. Oh my God, it turned out it was a blessing. And in actual fact, for probably most of us, those challenging situations in our life that we've had, we say, wow, thank God that happened, because that propelled me into my desire for God. I'm actually really, really grateful for that experience. And so, actual fact, this is what's happening. And so, the interesting thing about this movie, why we loved it so much, is he has no thoughts of God. He's very angry at God actually, and he's like, well, if God was real, then he would have come and rescued me, wouldn't he? And why would I have gone through all this? He's not praying, he's not spiritual at all. Yeah, he's completely off the charts. He's not interested in any of those things. And does God really care about that? Yeah, does God care if we're praying at the end of our beds and we try and do all these good things? Not really. He knows the desire of our heart. It makes absolutely no difference. He can connect with anyone. Whatever you seemingly do in form, you're the most devoted one, and nothing happens. And yet this guy is in a terrible scenario. God comes, but God will come if that is the true desire of the heart to really remember. And so seemingly in his thought system, that is not even on the table. He's not even thinking in that way. In fact, he's completely pushing away. He's completely saying the denial of God, and I'm going to drink and I'm going to do all these things, and he becomes nasty himself. He becomes a very difficult character to be around because he has to drink so much to be able to cope with the hallucinations and everything. And so what I love about this movie is it really makes no difference what we do in the form that God will come. Everybody is God loves everyone, and God doesn't see any of these things.
Mm.
And so that's the beautiful thing about us all, because our story probably definitely isn't as torturous as this, but yet we all hold on to our fantasy of ourselves and we say, well, one day I will redeem myself from all the terrible things that I've done that I don't want to tell anybody about, but I know. And then hopefully, if I'm good enough, then maybe God will actually even love me as well. Maybe even I might be even lovable for God. And God laughs at that fantasy and says, well, you're already loved. This is another game that you keep playing. And God doesn't see anything that you've ever done. God doesn't see people. God doesn't understand that concept at all. So he just knows you as pure love. Yeah. And he hears these, they hear these calls of how terrible I am, and they all just laugh in heaven. It's like it's a comedy really for them. They really enjoy this comedy. Yeah. of the wars and everything like that, and they're sitting up there absolutely laughing their heads off, thinking that this is real. Where they think, oh my God, they believe this to be real. And it's such a joke, yeah. And this movie actually reminded me of an experience that Paramahansa Yogananda had. And I think this was actually in World War One, when World War One happened. And I think the war was over, and he'd read about it in the papers and all the terrible things that were going on. And he was really touched by it, like, wow, how can we be doing this? This is awful, yeah. And then the cinema sort of took off, and he went to the cinema, and one of the movies was a reenactment of the war, yeah. And he's sitting there and he's watching the movie play out of a reenactment of part of the war, and he's sitting there and he's, oh, wow, this is so awful. How can we be doing this to one another? And all of this pain just came up of the devastation, yeah. And then he had, like, you could maybe call it a revelation, whereby God sort of gave him the interpretation and said, look, you're in a cinema, there's a screen, and these are characters, and it's not real, yeah? It's not actually happening. It's all seemingly in the projector, yeah? And you go back into the projector, there's actually nothing there. There's only light that is actually truly projecting out, is light, but the things that are moving on the screen are completely and utterly made up. You're literally dreaming this. And then the voice said, and including the war that you believe to be real is a fantasy as well. And in that moment, he had that experience of that he was literally dreaming all these experiences as he was in the cinema, because it truly wasn't actually happening. It was just on a screen. And he was like, wow, he removed himself, and he then just observed the scene playing out just the same as any scene, as if it was a good scene or whatever, and said, no, God said they're nothing. You're the dreamer of the dream, and this cannot touch you, cannot change who you are. And so he had that experience. And so maybe today we can have that experience too. So I think if you feel anything with this, because the scenes aren't really, really graphic, they don't really, really go into that, but we can just allow ourselves to feel whatever comes through, and really see what we believe, and then we can just start to remove ourselves more away from that, and say, please show me that this is a fantasy. I really need to see that. We want a real experience of that, don't we, in our heart and in our mind, to see that we are absolutely observing it and it cannot touch us. So yeah, that's that.
Yeah, that's beautiful, because I think today this session is like opportunity to really, really open ourselves up to the power of forgiveness, because this is not a casual moment. This is not the next thing you are doing during your day. This is it, as every moment is. This is it. This is it, when the transformation and the healing can happen and you can accept it. So I want to really emphasize it, because the ego always shuts us down to this moment, and it always goes to the future, or what I'm gonna do, all the to-dos that I have next, all the functions that I have next. After this movie, I'm gonna do or this or that. But no, this is the moment, and you are here for forgiveness. And this is a beautiful thing about us coming together. It's not actually bodies coming together that is special, but the purpose that we have in our mind and the desire. Otherwise, you would not be watching this, and you would not be here, and we would not be having this conversation if you didn't really want this. So you want it. So I just want to encourage you to just open your mind that this is the moment. And I think this movie is a beautiful demonstration of whatever it is you went through in the past, whatever it is that is haunting you, even something about your personality, something that happened in your family, all of this kind of trauma, childhood trauma, whatever it is, this is the opportunity to accept the miracle that the character is accepting the correction, really, because this movie is not about what intensity he is going through. It's really about where he is led, this moment of total transformation of his mind. And the way I found the first movie, which was released in 2013, I think, I watched that. I found that movie first, and I watched some interviews. And that movie is directed by Angelina Jolie, and she was talking about this character, this man, Louis Zamparini, which some of you may know because he's a hero in America. And she was talking about this man, and apparently they were friends. And she was saying, I have never met a person who was carrying more joy than he. Like, he was always joyous, always happy. He had always some kind of wisdom to extend. And that got my attention. I was like, always enjoy? What is that? Like, there must be something, some kind of forgiveness behind it. How can it be that man receives this kind of reflection? So I went into it and I found this movie and the whole story. And I think that's what really drew me into it. And then I watched it, and just before I watched that movie, I was going through some things, let's call it ego backlash. And when I watched it, I was like, oh my God, it's not really about what he's going through and why it's justified for him to go through the intensity and darkness. Oh, this happened to him, so this is why he's going through the intensity. But intensity is the ego itself. And when I watched the movie, I was like, oh my God, this is my ego playing out. This is what was literally happening to me several days ago. So in that sense, it's not really about the story of what happened to him, but the ego, craziness of the ego, and recognizing what we are allowing in our mind to happen. And the moment of where he's led to is where we are also led. And my mind just went blank. And let's see. And I wanted to actually share some of the things like a background, because this movie begins with some of the really, really fast information about him. And then this movie starts with him coming from Japan, from the concentration camp back to America, basically. And everyone, his family thinks that, oh, he's just going to continue living the way he lived before. So that's where the movie continues. So it does not really deal like with the war directly or with him being in the camp, but it's just him reliving those moments again and again and again, and holding on to this idea. And actually, when you will see that everything that he's going through, for him, it's always about God and what he believes about God. So the whole movie is dealing with his belief about God, that God is so, like, God is punishing him. God is asking him to sacrifice. All these deep-seated, seemingly dark beliefs, all of this is up for him. And he's always dealing with this belief about God. And that's what we are called to transform today, and to look at and to let it go. So even when he was a child, he was actually quite mischievous, let's say. When he was 5, he started smoking. When he was 8, he started drinking. So he was like a troublemaker. He would get into trouble. He would, with teachers, with cops, with anything really. He was a troublemaker. And then he has a brother whose name is Peter. And I feel like this morning I was thinking about their relationship, and actually I feel some kind of emotion with it, because his brother became like a guardian for him, like a guardian angel who always tried and tries to care for him. So he was this troublemaker. So his brother enrolls him into this running competition, which he does not actually feel like he wants to go into it, but he enrolls and he does it. He does the competition and he comes third, and all of a sudden he finds out, oh my God, I can direct all this mind energy that I'm using inappropriately, let's say, I can direct it towards this, and I can I can use all this energy to run. And then it feels so good for him. It feels so natural for him. When he runs, his mind is just quiet. Nothing is happening. So in a way, that was his connection with God and with quietness and stillness. And then he actually sets record, like national high school record. And then he goes to Olympics when he's 19, and he's the youngest one to be accepted for Olympics. And then these Olympics were held in 1936 in Berlin in summer, and he comes eighth, but he does the last lap. He does it so fast that he gets attention of Adolf Hitler, and he was like, "I want to meet this guy." And they actually meet, and they they shake hands, and the Olympics end. And in September, war starts, and Louis goes to war. He enrolls in Air Force. He becomes what is his role?
Fighter pilot.
Yeah, something like that. So you can see how his life unfolds, and it's like trouble, as Ken was saying, troublemaker, seemingly not like a nice guy or whatever. And his life, when you look at the whole life, whole picture of his life, is just unbelievable. And he goes to war, and he's a I don't know what you said. He's on a plane basically, and then their plane is shot by Japan, and it falls into Pacific Ocean, and they are on this boat, and they are there for 47 days, and sometimes Japanese airplanes come and shoot them, and they have to jump in the water, but in the water there are sharks, so they have to manage to get out really, really fast on the boat again, and then the airplane comes again. So he goes through this for 47 days, and that's why the first part of the movie is unbroken, because he does not allow the circumstances to break him and to give up or to give in. So after 47 days, Japanese find him, and they take him to prison, and then another phase of that starts with torturing and everything. And then he comes back, then that's when the movie starts. So I really wanted to share like what is his character and who he is, and how actually he has this willpower and the strength, but because he does not want to share, it just goes downhill. And as Ken was saying, he says all these nasty things about God, but then he is attracted to this lady who believes in God, and she says, "Actually, I pray unceasingly. I pray all the time." So he attracts this character in his life who believes in God, who prays all the time, even though he says that he has nothing to do with God, or he doesn't want to believe in him at all. So I was just thinking, sometimes we think that, oh, this is my reflection, or whatever he's going through, that guard, the bird that was torturing him. Of course, it was his reflection of his mind and his beliefs, but then this relationship coming into his life, who reflects this deep prayer and God and desire for healing and all of that, is just as much as strong a reflection for him as anything else, because it's like somewhere in his mind he does want this solution, but he doesn't know how to accept it. So basically, this is the whole thing. And actually, I felt to read because I think it's really, really helpful. The lesson 14th, God did not create a meaningless world. Because in this movie, we are dealing with so many concepts of war and disaster and this terrifying pain, hurt, and so many things. I think it's such a beautiful opportunity to look at everything that is on our mind. Even right now, what is happening in the world, it's not really different. It's all the same, war and tragedy and all of that. So I wanted to read parts of this lesson and for us to have it in mind when we watch it, so that we don't necessarily get caught up in what is happening in form, but look at actually choose a perspective that we want to watch it with. So Jesus says, God did not create a meaningless world. The world you see has nothing to do with reality. It is of your own making, and it does not exist. With eyes closed, think of all the horrors in the world that cross your mind. Name each one as it occurs to you. and then deny its reality. God did not create it, and so it is not real. Say, for example, God did not create that war, and so it is not real. God did not create that airplane crash, and so it is not real. God did not create that disaster, and so it is not real. This is your personal repertory of horrors at which you are looking. These things are part of the world you see. Some of them are shared illusions, and others are part of your personal hell. It does not matter. What God did not create can only be in your own mind apart from His. Therefore, it has no meaning. In recognition of this fact, conclude the practice periods by repeating today's idea. God did not create a meaningless world. And everything that you will see in the movie, all the hallucinations and the reflections and the thoughts that he has, it's his chosen horrors. And every one of us have this kind of list of horrors that we are terrified and we don't want to look at and we are afraid of. So what you're gonna watch in the movie unfold is the horrors that the mind chose to face and to experience. It's not that something or someone is doing something to him. It's a choice in the mind. It's a decision. It's our own decision. Everything that is happening in your life, it's by your decision. The world you see is a vengeful world, and everything in it is a symbol of vengeance. Each of your perceptions of external reality is a pictorial representation of your own attack thoughts. One can well ask if this can be called sin. Is not fantasy a better word for such a process, and hallucination a more appropriate term for the result? So Jesus is not calling hallucination or fantasy like when like some kind of images appearing out of nowhere in your mind. Actually, Jesus is calling hallucination all the perception. So we are not different from Louis. We are going through the same thing in our mind every time we are allowing the ego to speak to us and we listen to it and we give it the power. This is what we are accepting in our mind. And Louis' journey is somehow more intense, and it's actually a blessing because he cannot walk away from it. He cannot shy away from it because it's so on the surface. So everything that he's going through, we are going through in our mind, and the solutions that he's accepting, we are to accept in our mind. So it's not really about form things, but look at from the mind's perspective, and it will be really, really helpful for you. You will be able to see the miracle in it. So I think we